This week, we've got Paul DeSousa, who is a former vice president at Ulta Beauty. And I think a lot of us have assumptions about the beauty industry probably being an easier place to be out at work. So we have a long conversation and a really interesting one with Paul about that. One of the topics that we hit with him is something that we're going to come back to again and again, which is his experience with imposter syndrome.
What I liked about our discussion with Paul, Ken, was that at any stage in your career, you can experience imposter syndrome. It might show up differently, but how you handle it is different depending on where you are in your career. And I'm excited for our listeners to hear about the different stages of Paul's career and how he handled it, the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And he has a really unique perspective on it. And I think that him being part of the beauty industry also adds another additional layer of just sort of interest. I'm more of a financial services person. James is a pharma person. To hear that perspective from that very different industry was really interesting. So it's my pleasure to present episode 3 of the Q Suite with Paul DeSousa from Ulta Beauty. Paul, welcome to the Q Suite.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's really great to have you. I would love it if you could tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself, your name, and kind of what your career trajectory has been, just in a couple of sentences.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Paul DeSousa. I've been in the retail industry for my entire career. And most recently, I was with Ulta Beauty, where I had the opportunity to lead teams across operations, human resources, merchandising. And my most recent role, I was leading teams in our salon business. So excited to be here with you today and talk a little bit more about my career and really what it means to be a part of the community.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much again for being here. So, one of the things that was really interesting to me when we had our pre-call and when I was taking a look at your profile was the industry that you were in. And it's, I come from the financial services industry, very much a B2B kind of orientation. James comes from pharma. Tell us a little bit about the combination of working for the beauty industry while also doing so from an office based in the Midwest.
Yeah, I think it was quite honestly surprising to me as well. Started my career with Gap Inc. And so obviously a very progressive company, even in the 90s when I started. So I was not sure about how it would be joining a company when I joined Ulta back in the mid 2000s. But I will tell you, I think the most interesting thing about the beauty industry itself is that at the foundation of the beauty industry is this sense of being able to be yourself, express yourself, and really do what the products and the experiences make you feel your whole self. And while it wasn't always very inclusive in the industry, and back early on, there was always the images of the blonde white woman, and that was this image of beauty. All of that has drastically shifted over the last, 15, 20 years. And Ulta, they were at the forefront of some of that work in terms of really reshaping the narrative of what it means, when we think about beauty. And so for me, it was certainly a pleasant surprise joining the organization. And, I joined well before the days of, where people were digging into LinkedIn and there wasn't Glassdoor. So I was kind of going in a little blind, except I knew some of the folks that were there and I trusted their guidance. But it really, the beauty industry itself lends itself to being a place where you can be authentic and creative. And I think that regardless of where we're based, where you're at, it just comes through the DNA of the organization.
Okay, I'm jealous. I don't know how James feels, but after hearing that description of just, what the nature of the work is, yeah, financial services doesn't feel nearly as warm as that, let's say. James, did you have a question?
Paul, so one, thank you for telling us a little bit more about the beauty industry. I think it sounds great coming from pharma, just being able to live your true self, feel authentic, and hearing that it was more of a recent journey in the industry. So with that, cross industry, some leaders may feel that being out is a vulnerability, right? Others may see that as a sign of like a superpower for empathy. So, as someone who's leading teams, it sounds very cross-functional teams,
Yep.
how much of your own personal journey informs the way that you are building the training and development for your associates? And did you leave the environment the way that you wish you had when you started your career?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think I've been fortunate to work in places where it wasn't a problem for me to be out. I think early on in my career, I wasn't comfortable probably, but I grew into that. And when I joined Ulta back, I told Ken one of the very first days, someone who just retired, like last month, asked me, "Who did you move here with?" And I thought, oh, here we go. Like, what am I going to say? Like in this weird conversation, getting coffee. And I just said, my partner. And she was like, oh, that's great. Where do you guys live? And then it just like it's just off and running, right? But I think for me, in the way that I lead my teams, the way that I guide them as we're building content is really anchoring it in the values that we hold, true, and the way that we want to treat each other and the way we want to treat our guests. So I think, that enabled me to lead from that point of view. And then I think just being comfortable and being authentic and being open to sharing my story then helped get people to buy in, and people understood and people wanted to be a part of the journey. And so I think looking back, now I could not be prouder of the work that, I led and my teams delivered, especially as it relates to the way we're thinking about how we care for each other and how we care for our guests. We can teach people how to ring the register and, open and close the store. That's fun and great. But the way we talk and the way we teach people how to engage, how to connect, and how to make people feel safe, seen, and heard when they're in the store or just with a colleague, at the office, that I think is the work I look back on that is truly the most important. And that couldn't have happened if all of us couldn't be bringing our uniqueness to the table as part of the work that we do.
I love that, Paul. That is
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, I mean, I have a little bit of a follow-up. So, I mean, it wasn't just the work that you're doing as part of your daily assignment that led you there. You were also instrumental, as we had discussed, in building ERGs at Ulta and being a part of that. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that trajectory felt like? I've inherited a couple of ERGs, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But I haven't built one from scratch, and I'd love to hear more about that experience.
Yeah, no, I think I was super fortunate to be able to work when we hired our first leader for diversity, equity, and inclusion back in like 2017, 2018, when she started. And we stood up some champions networks, we called them at the time. They weren't full blown, but to be able to be on the ground and to be able to create spaces where we could share our stories. And, some of the most powerful fireside chats we had for the Proud, but ended up being the Proud Business Resource Group, which is what it kind of developed into, were when people just shared their story. And we had, out executives sharing their stories and just how they came up and what's important and what the challenges have been. Then we had parents share the stories of, oh, my son or my daughter is a member of the community. And our chief merchandising officer, both of her children are members of the community. And I still remember that fireside chat when she shared the story. Like, she was crying. Everyone was crying. It was like this whole emotional, but it brought us all together. And it kind of connected, across, and being able to work not just on the Proud BRG, but I also worked with the teams across the other BRGs that we had to really help just create this sense of connectedness, especially in an organization that was over 60,000 people, but none of we didn't all sit together. We were every state, stores everywhere, people all across the country. This was a way for us to find community and connection, and also to create a space for people to feel safe. We had someone just recently join from the financial services consulting side. And when he came
Sounds like me.
Yeah, he came to one of our first activations, and he was blown away. It's like, I can't believe we have this here. What do we like? Tell me more. And he jumped right in and got involved because he found an organization where he could just be who he wanted to be at work. And so I think that is ultimately the most, impactful element. And it also just created and gave space for people to share their stories on their
Yeah.
time. And that's also super important.
I think the ERGs that I've been involved with, it's really about the content and the programming that's really helpful for the people who are in the group. Because, I think, look, I give all credit to some of the companies I work for, particularly Capgemini was really outstanding in terms of that. But it's hygiene. It was DEI hygiene. They'd give us a pittance of money and we would sort of bootstrap it all together. And this is a very large company. So while I appreciated that, it very much was a place that felt accommodating, welcoming, what you're describing is on another level.
Yeah. We didn't have a ton of money, but we were scrappy and we got things done. And, I think we relied on our partners. We were in the Chicago Pride Parade every year and marching and passing out, makeup and fun things to people in the crowd. But I think that was part of this like community building for our team, but then also showing up, especially in our hometown. I think that also you have to bring the visibility out. It was just an opportunity for us to take the business resource group and showcase the work we're doing for those who really maybe have no idea, that this is a type of environment where they could have a career too. And, this is a place you'd want to be.
Yeah.
I love that you call it a BRG and not an ERG, a business resource group. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as someone who was a part of the Pride ERG at work, which ERG again is an employee resource group, it was great very early in my career. Like the start, it was an awesome networking opportunity to meet leaders at different levels, but also get exposure to different areas of the business. So I do think while there is this community building aspect, there's also, like you said, there's definitely a business aspect. In pharma, there wasn't many. I started my career as a chemist, Paul, so there wasn't many outside the lab opportunities other than being involved in an employee resource group, right? So being able to leverage your network, even internally, I feel like is such a good community building moment, So I'm glad, one, I did not know that about you, Paul, that you brought the ERGs to your company. So I just wanted to commend you that because that's how I really started my career. And to kind of go off, right, the beauty industry in general and talking about our being authentic at work and our self-expression, being a part of the beauty industry, does it make it easier to be an out executive, or is there still kind of a glass ceiling for our LGBTQ plus executives when you reach like the VP level and above?
Yeah, I don't think there was necessarily a glass ceiling for all. And whether for some folks it was easy to be out, I was comfortable, and there were others. But I think it's just all about your personal preference and how and where you came from too, like how you came up and how comfortable you were in those spaces. I think what was critical for me in the work that I wanted to do there and be a part of was that I wanted to make sure that people like me who were starting in the stores maybe or starting early at the corporate office could see that someone like them was a vice president at the organization. Someone like them was doing this work. I think where the opportunity lies for our community is really beyond the L and the G. So, I think especially within the beauty industry, we have many associates who identify as trans. And for them to be able to see someone like them who is rising through the ranks. And we, seeing when we had store managers who were part of the community, like those are the types of stories and those are the types of things that we need more of so that people don't feel like maybe that there is this self-imposed glass ceiling. I think that I have many friends who do not work in the beauty industry and it's different for them. And they, it's a little bit like, I can't believe you can do that at work and not we're doing anything. It's like, I show up how I am and people at work know my husband and he's been to the office and, so it was, I think it was that that was fortunate. I know it's not like that everywhere, but I think the work is so important, especially in retail in particular, probably most likely, really this broad spectrum of retail. This is a huge opportunity for us to continue to raise up the next generation of leaders from our community to keep this work, moving forward.
Well, that begs a question that I've been contemplating, which is in this era of sort of being so concerned about wokeness and all of the things that are happening with the trans community, that has to have an impact on your talent strategy and how you are trying to source roles. Talk a little bit about how you have navigated that sort of most recently. I know that given the fact that you do have trans employees, it's got to be something that you've considered.
Oh, absolutely. I think, from, all really the whole full cycle of talent management, we looked and considered, for all. Like, I think one of the biggest pieces that from a foundational perspective, our values, our mission, our vision, and our values were always true. And that was our guiding post. And so when some of the social and environmental things that happened, really around the pandemic, and you saw many companies start to make these drastic shifts of, being like, oh, we're going to do all this work in this diversity inclusion space because this is what everyone else is doing. We were already there and we were already doing the work, and it just gave us an opportunity to amplify the work. And so I think from simple things like within our systems, being able to use your chosen name versus so that you don't necessarily need to see your dead name. Now, that wasn't easy to do, but we finally got there, to be able to do that. And so I think little things like that helped along the way. And then the other piece I think that was, we think about is we want everybody to feel welcome and included and feel that they belong, whether you're a guest or an associate. So that is different. And so we had to, for some folks, we're a multi-generational workforce, just like any other industry. And so we spent time like providing training, educational resources, and, simple things and like why we talk about our pronouns at work. And, you don't have to put your pronouns in your signature, but you're welcome to. You could put them on your name tag if you worked in the store. You don't have so it was very much, if this is something, and this is why it's important. We spent really a lot of time, we just were getting ready to launch some training that was really focused on how to help someone who's trans coming in for their first haircut, because that's a very emotional and that's a very pivotal point in their transition. And so how to make them feel comfortable in the chair, and really how to talk to them, and how to really just have those conversations with guests, and being able to have the confidence to say, what are your pronouns? How would you like me to address you? In ways that are respectful, and then really creating that culture of respect was what we built.
Absolutely, Paul. Let's pull the aperture back a little bit. So you have spent all this time creating safe spaces for people. I want to know about what young Paul and his career looked like, and what was your kind of comfort level and trajectory of coming out in the workplace.
Yeah, I mean, young Paul was like a mess. I'll say that, but probably, I think we all were, right? But
young Kayla's a mess. I think young James is a mess. I think it's
yeah. I wasn't, I think I grew up in Chicago and big family and Irish Catholic and all the things. So I was not, out and proud at work when I started. I didn't not talk about it, but I didn't talk about it either, if that makes sense. It was just, and part of that.
Yeah.
And, so I think for me, everything came full circle. And this is going to sound very cliche, but when I was with Gap Inc., I got promoted and I moved to San Francisco and to the corporate office. And then I was just like, oh my gosh, everybody is like me here. This is great. And then that, that just happened, right? So I think that was kind of the unlock for me, is being in a space where, I could be myself and be comfortable. And it was almost like expected, I guess, that's kind of, sounds interesting. And then from there was no looking back. And it was, it was a part of it's who I am. And it's a part of the work that I do. It helps me, I think, be a better leader if I'm showing up as my full self. And so I think that was really my unlock, was moving to San Francisco of all places. But it just really finding that community that gave me the confidence to be able to say, here I am.
Can I say that might be the unlock for many people over many generations moving to San Francisco?
Yep.
Which
Or
is
New
not in any
York.
way to diminish the impact of it, or New York, which is not in any way to diminish the impact of it. Look, I get it. Someday I'll tell you a funny story about my first arrival in San Francisco.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to hear that one. Yeah, and just to as Ken put it, because I really liked it, like set the aperture back in. Just I really wanted to highlight the power of visibility, because same thing with you, Paul. I was also a mess starting my career, and that was 10 years ago for me, right? There was something very powerful seeing the first out VP at my company, at a big pharmaceutical company, and him just being brave and just saying, here's my husband, this is about me. It was a very different style than what we saw in like the traditional like science side of things. It was just, we weren't even in the same business unit. It was in a very different business unit. Again, I started as a chemist. This was someone who was in like business alliances and vendor management. And it was just nice to see the visibility, right? Because you can connect with that person. And it's great to be on the other end and to see just the power of my visibility as well, just how I've navigated through my career. And I know we're all just talking about being messes as we start our career. Ken, I kind of want to hear yours a little bit, if you're okay sharing.
Well, my first trip to San Francisco?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
that is a story that's very embarrassing. And
No.
I will not tell you, but I'll just say this. It involved a very bad rug that I was wearing at the time, and a pigeon. So that's all I'm going to say. I got out of the cab on Castro Street and I met a pigeon, or actually the rug that I was wearing met a pigeon. That's what I'll say. Yeah. So yeah, it's not a pretty story.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Paul, to bring us back, right?
Yep.
As we're talking about just how we started our career, right? Thinking back when you started your career, did you ever experience imposter syndrome? And if so, like, how did that show up? And what would you tell someone who's earlier in their career how to manage that voice?
Yeah, I think I've had bouts of imposter syndrome like throughout my career, right? I think like everybody feels it, and it's okay. It's a part of the challenge. It's a part of the push. Like you're going to start growing here, but you've earned that seat at the table and you got the job. And so now it's time to showcase what you can do. And I think it can be tough. I think one of the biggest battles I faced with it was at my time at Gap Inc. was just not being able to connect with the leader two above me. And he would come to my market and I would be a mess. I was just like, I don't know what he did. I couldn't unlock that. And it took me a lot to think about it. And, I ultimately left the organization partly because of him and really that relationship. But it was something that I struggled with earlier on, less so now, but there's still, I took on a new assignment for my last year with Ulta. I took on a new assignment and it was so out of my league in terms of the work I had done and, leading through there. And I often wondered, can I do this? And then I just had to come back to kind of, I can do this. I have a team around me that will come. And I know I have the resources across. I have great peers, like my peers, like coming through. So it's became less about, I don't belong here, but more about who do I need to work with and who can I rely on to help if I'm stuck?
And also, isn't it a little bit, for me at least, because I certainly have struggled with imposter syndrome from very early in my career. I think I'm a career marketing person. I think marketing people have that sickness probably even more than most. But don't you also, for me, biting it off in a daily chunks? Today, I only need to do this.
Yeah.
And if I do this, then I'm reaching the goal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And to comment to Ken, you are definitely not alone. Like I recall just as a chemist, like feeling like I wasn't smart enough or I didn't present the right way or just like what Paul and what you said, Ken, just having a support around you, maybe your peers or your manager or a peers manager, just kind of supporting you. I felt like that's what helped me too. So good to hear that it doesn't matter at what level we all experience it. it's just finding your network to help you support through it. So thank you, Paul.
Of course.
Ken, I hand it over to you.
Yeah, I think so. We've got one more question, and we've got a little bit of a rapid fire round, which we're going to shoot at you, and we hope you're game for that. But my last question really is, what are you up to these days? I mean, I know it's an exciting time and a transition for you. Talk to us a little bit about what's going on with you now.
Yeah, I think for me, it's been interesting. I left Ulta at the end of January, and I'm on a little career break. And
Recently.
recently, yeah, 3 months, yeah. So, but um, it it was a little unnerving at first, quite honestly, because I've worked since I was 15. I'm not 15, so it's been a long time. But it was it's okay, and I think now I'm you know getting reconnected with folks who I've crossed paths with, and really just kind of thinking about what is next for me, and what you know most likely it'll be something in the talent space. That's where, I really, that work to me is so meaningful, because it's really, you get to touch and impact every associate that, your team is supporting. So, right now I'm taking a little break, and it's been pleasant, like reconnecting with friends, and, just reading and being able to kind of just take a beat, and then I'll be jumping back into the workforce soon.
Yeah, we need you in talent, Paul. We need people like you putting people in roles.
I will eventually be back. I promise that.
I'm going to hold you to that.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Well, Paul, now we are in our Q Suite mentoring moment. So I'm going to rapid fire 3 questions, and the last question is going to be about your mentoring moment. So what a mentoring moment is, if you could share with our guests just a moment you had with a mentor or someone that supported you in the growth of your career or changed your life in some way, either personal, professional. So to kick us off with the first question is, what's the most important trait you think a leader should have in 2026?
I think what comes to mind off the top of my head is curiosity. And, with the ways of work are changing so quickly, and being open to new ways of working, and really how do we leverage and harness technology in a new way to help us move that much faster. And I think without, that curious mindset, if you don't have that now, and that want to learn, and really be a part of what's happening, that you will struggle and be left behind, quite honestly.
Well
Here,
said.
here. I'm so glad to hear you say that. I mean, I've entered into a new role myself in the last 4 months, and it's all about sort of AI and about leaning into it. And you can be scared of it if you choose to be, but it's a train. It's here. It's not coming. It's here. So it's either hop on or get run over, I'm afraid, at this point.
Yep. And we're humans, right? We evolve with the times, so we got to keep up with that. So next rapid fire question. What's one thing you would tell your younger self the first day of your career?
I think back and took the job at Gap. I had graduated from college. I took a job, like an office type job. It was horrible. I quit. And I didn't have a job. So I walked into an Old Navy store, and they offered me a manager job when Old Navy was very small, and I had no business being a manager, but there I was. And I look back at that, and I still remember the times in that first store. I wasn't thinking about it then, but it's like, you're here, and then like kind of just enjoy this. And this is going to be so formative. And that my time at Gap Inc. shaped me beyond, personally, professionally. And I just had no idea. So it's like, I knew nothing then. And looking back now, it's like that was this amazing place to kickstart your career. So as you're starting, don't, always think about it as I'll just be here for 18 months. I'll be here for 2 years, like be open to that possibility and really take it all in.
Love it.
Yeah, good advice. Good advice. Last question. What is your Q Suite mentoring moment, Paul?
I think for me, the one that came to mind first as I've been thinking about this is it's back in the early 2000s. I was not in talent. I was a district manager, and we were in a succession planning meeting, and we were talking about some of the talent who was struggling. And the conversation was probably not how it should have been. Like it probably wasn't as respectful. And it was just the district managers in the room for our market. And we were just, and our recruiting partner stopped the conversation and said, remember, there's a room like this where people are discussing your future and they're talking about your potential. And you want to make sure that we're being respectful and being speaking about everyone as an individual. And it kind of stopped me in my tracks because I didn't even realize we were, maybe not talking about people in the most respectful way in this room where we were thinking about who's like the potential for our general managers. And that, I still talk to that woman and haven't worked together since 2007. I message her on LinkedIn all the time and we go back and forth because it was just, reminding me and reminding everybody that we have to put the humanity into all of our talent practices. And we are all at the core. No one's coming to work saying, I'm going to mess everything up today. I'm going to screw something up. And if someone's struggling, what can we do to help them? And maybe it's not the right job and that's okay. And maybe it's just they just didn't know. So I think for me, it was that sense of humanity and really dignity that I used as I had the opportunity to lead talent, for a large organization, that making sure that all of our talent processes were really centered on the human and centered on creating the best environment for our teams.
It's amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. And with that, let's close out our episode with Paul. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us at the Q Suite.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.